Hey guys, so I hesitated making this video, and I'm hesitating making this video because I don't want there to be even the slightest chance of anything that I say being connected back to my family that's currently in Ukraine. I come from Ukraine, I was born in Ukraine, and I've got family still back there who are currently hiding out, and they're not hiding out from the Russian soldiers, they're hiding out from the Ukrainian fascist government and militia that's there. And they are hiding out so they don't get dragged into war or beaten or killed because of their point of view, if they ever found out. And that's the kind of things that are happening there right now. And I can't emphasize that enough, is that the Western media certainly will never ever ever show a different opinion. They're mostly in Lviv. So most of them are like just hiding out away from anywhere where the action is happening. If they were actually to go and see the kind of people that are fighting right now, they would get a shock. The West would get a shock to see what's actually going on the ground. Because things like just recently was a mayor who got dragged outside and shot in the middle of the street basically because he had pro-Russian views. And the official statement that came out from the Ukrainian government was that he was judged by the People's Court or something along those lines. That's just one big example, but that stuff happens on a small scale all the time. And this is the kind of people that the West is currently supporting. And I'm making this video because I want to tell people, share this knowledge so that people have this different opinion. Because what all the media, the Western media has told people is Putin bad, Zelensky good, Russia bad, Ukraine good. There's no nuance, there's no history. They're trying to turn this into a melodrama. They're trying to turn this into some ego thing, like, oh, Putin's ego needs to be satisfied, or he's getting old and he wants, or like he's on steroids and he's going crazy or something like that. It's got nothing to do with a person's mental state. Like, I know Biden is fucking insane now, like he's demented, but the whole situation what happened. It's very very explainable. Like, it was people should have seen this coming. I mean, I didn't think that Russia would invade, but I didn't think that Russia would invade not because that they weren't gonna do it. I didn't think the Ukrainian government would ever push the situation this far. And what's basically happened is the Ukrainian people have been manipulated and they've been brainwashed into thinking that everything will just turn out like fine, that they can just easily join NATO and the EU with no consequences. And I'll get into that, the nuance of the situation as well, because yes, ideally any sovereign nation should be allowed to do whatever they want to do, right? So it should be allowed. If Ukrainians want to join the EU or NATO, they should be allowed to do it. That's the ideological kind of point of view. And ideologically, I would also agree with that. Like, ideologically, I'm a big fan of Taiwan. I love Taiwan. I've traveled there. And ideologically, if Taiwan decided tomorrow to claim that they're becoming another state of America, and they changed their flag to an American flag, and they said, "Hey, Americans, come over to Taiwan. You can build a nuclear base here. You can put, a navy base. You can put nuclear missiles here, right next to China." Ideologically, ideally, I think Taiwan should be able to do that. But realistically, that shit was never gonna fly. That shit was just never gonna happen. So that was the reality, that Russia was never going to allow Ukraine to join NATO. So they should have stayed neutral. That's how this war could have been avoided. As well as they should have stopped killing the people in eastern Ukraine. Bombing indiscriminately civilians and the people living there. So what I've got up here is a map of Ukraine, and this is the election of 2004, I believe. This was the last proper election that happened. And if you look at, I should have pulled up. Can I actually move this a bit? Oh no, the percentage here is here. So 90%. So as you can see, Eastern Ukraine was over 90% in support of the pro-Russian leader there, and he actually came from this area. I think he's related to the people here. That's why the current fascist and proper fascists in Ukraine that are the government dogs. And again, I'll get into all the nuances because the Western media isn't telling you the nuances. Yeah, the prime minister is Jewish. He's got Jewish background, but it is what it is. They are genuine fascists there that are fighting, and they're basically using each other to gain power. I'll even tell you what I think was going to happen, because I think the fascists at the end, once this thing is all said and done, I think, and this is my prediction, I think Zelensky will meet with like an accident at some point, and he'll be a martyr for Ukraine. It won't be because of the Russians, but it'll be internal, and the fascists will, once he's served his use, which was always the plan, they'll take over and lead Ukraine. I believe that's what will happen, but we'll see. So they're the ones who are actually fighting and dying right now. They're the ones who are doing most of the fighting. Zelensky's sitting in his bloody wherever he is, even if he's in Kiev anymore. But yeah, he's absolutely safe. So the people that are doing the fighting are fascist, and that's the reason why they're not letting people out of Mykolaiv. And it's so much to get through. So much to get through. I'll try to do it by point, but I might be all over the place a bit. But I hope you guys get as much info from this as possible, because I'm going to be jumping around from place to place, from history probably to the current situation and stuff. But that's the bit of history of what happened. The map is a bit of history of what happened in the election. So as you can see, South and Eastern Ukraine is very supportive of the pro-Russian, and Western Ukraine is very supportive of the anti-Russian, and pro-EU and stuff like that. And that's accurate. And in the middle, it's mostly mixed. And then the western part, of course, the western part, like around Lviv and stuff, it's more Polish than Ukrainian or or Russian, or whatever you consider Ukrainian or Russian to be, I guess, because the whole country itself, and this is the problem with just drawing borders. And as you know, England was really bad at this. They would just draw a border somewhere, and a lot of the time the border was drawn to actually weaken the nation, because they wanted to create conflict. So a lot of the borders in the Middle East were actually drawn up with England or America, or whoever was drawing the border at the time, willingly knowing that they would create conflict, but they did it so it would weaken the people. So they would like Iraq, I think, was 3 distinct clans living there, and what they did with Iraq is they drew the border and they put one person in charge of the 3. So of course there's always going to be conflict, there's always going to be like hatred and animosity, but it kept the place unstable, so to speak, on purpose. So they remained weak. So all that kind of stuff happened throughout history. So people need to get over this idea that, oh well, once the Soviet Union fell, it was drawn. They drew a border and they drew like Crimea, and Russia stole Crimea and all this shit. Like, when the Soviet Union fell, no one knew that Ukraine would become so fucking insane. Russians and quote unquote Ukrainians, so everyone's in that general area called Ukraine, right? Or whatever you put it as, but they always got along. Like, where I grew up, I never spoke a word of Ukrainian. My grandparents don't know a word of Ukrainian. And again, I can't reveal exactly specifics of where I was, because once my family is 100% safe, which I'm hoping for a quick Russian takeover, then I can actually go into detail about my own personal circumstances. But I don't want to leave any opportunity of doxing or anything like that. I think I'm more or less safe. Like, I have a very good separation, but nonetheless, like I said, people who have a pro-Russian sentiment and things like that are getting dragged out of homes and killed right now in Ukraine. There's more people that will die by the Ukrainian hand than they will by Russian shelling. And that's not to say that Russians aren't shelling and not purposefully killing civilians, but accidentally killing civilians. And also, that's not to say that the Ukrainian fascist dogs that are fighting the Russians right now aren't holding the civilians as basically human shields. Because what they're doing, the reason why, so recently they tried to make a corridor for the civilians to leave. And for Russia, that would be ideal. If all the civilians leave, then they can bomb the fuck out of the people who are left there. So ideally, the only people that are left there would be the combatants. So they can go and like kill them all, right? So Russia wants the civilians to leave. For the Ukrainian government to say that Russians are bombing civilians as they're trying to leave is total nonsense. And I think there's actually video of all these people gathering ready to leave. So someone filmed it. And again, you gotta look this up somewhere else because you're not gonna see it in the Western media. But this video, the people gathered, and basically the fascist there saying to the civilians, well, no, you can't go, you're going to get shot if you go this way. Basically lying to them and not letting them go. Because they know if the civilians leave these areas, these cities, they know they're going to be on their own and they know they're just going to get slaughtered by the Russians. So Russia is holding back. This is actually going to be one of the most civilized war. Once this whole thing ends, it'll be considered one of the most civilized, one of the least casualty war. Well, apart from the people who are going to be killed by the Ukrainian government and going to be killed by the criminals who the Ukrainian government gave AK-47s and weapons to. So the people that are going to get robbed and murdered in Ukraine by other Ukrainian criminals, and he let prisoners out to quote unquote fight Russians, like. And again, I've got so much to like get to for people to add to their knowledge base. I'm sorry that I'm jumping around all over the place again, but I hope people are getting picking up bits and pieces and stuff and getting a clearer picture of what's happening. So yeah, most civilians are going to die because of the Ukrainian government, 100%. It's probably already, it's all going to be blamed on Russia, of course. Like, Ukraine will never have any accidental shelling of their own civilians, or all the executions that happened there will be justified also, and that's what they're doing. I think it was recently one of the people in the peace talks must have been a little pro-Russian, and he got executed by the Ukrainian government. That's the kind of judgment they have over there, right? And they'll spin the propaganda to cover it up, but that's the kind of people you're dealing with. Like, if you think about it, it's Russian, let's hate them and stuff. No, you still give people like a proper trial. You can still lock people up. You don't just put a bullet in their head straight away. That's feral. Like, even if it happened in a Western country, like, Americans were pissed off that they locked up the Japanese during during World War II. They put them in prison. So they were upset about that. So imagine if I just put a bullet in the head of every Japanese that was pro the war. Because there would have been some who were like nationalistic towards Japan over there. So that's what's happening. That's the kind of people you're dealing with. And all these like lefty retards, and unfortunately a lot of people on the right as well, the conservatives who've been brainwashed into supporting this shit, also need to really, really, really get... Because if this war escalates, it's going to cause World War II. And trust me, you don't want to have World War II over what's happening there. It'll be the stupidest thing. Well, it'll be completely by design. If they wanted a world war, they'll have it. Like, they'll just make it happen. So let's hope they don't want a world war there yet. But, if it happens on the pretext of, supporting the Ukrainian government here, it will be the absolute dumbest thing, and people are just gonna like look back on it and just go, what the fuck did we do? If there's any people left alive, that is. Alright, what else should we get to? Let's get to like a bit of history as well of the Russian people. I guess I'll mention that. So the Russian people actually started in Kiev, and I think they came up from Scandinavia, and then they moved to basically Moscow. So most of Ukraine was built by Russians as well. So they had like Poland and Austrians take over and rule some parts of what's considered Ukraine. And then eventually, the Tsar government came in and they kicked the Mongols out in a certain year. You can read up the proper history. I'm just giving you like a basic rundown. But in general, Ukrainians are all Russian originally. So Russians come from Ukraine, basically. They started off in Ukraine, in the area that's called Ukraine. Then the bulk of them moved to where Moscow is. And then they kind of came back and, quote unquote, took control of the area as well and united the area and stuff. But most of Ukraine was Russian. And that happened, through the USSR and stuff. And the very western Ukrainians, the people in like Lviv, they were more like Austrian Polish. And they actually fought with Hitler during World War II. And they committed like massive atrocities towards the Jews. So the Ukrainian government, the fascists in Ukraine are kind of offshoots of them, of those kind of people. And they're very different from Russians in a way, or the Russian Ukrainians who are mixed and stuff like that. But they've basically taken control of the country, and they started brainwashing people. They become very nationalistic, and they're doing things like if you had separated Ukraine, and sorry if I mentioned this before, but if you had separated Ukraine once the USSR fell apart by like Russians and non-Russians, most of Ukraine would have been Russian. Like only the very western part were Ukrainians, like they spoke Ukrainian there and stuff like that. Again, my whole family, my grandparents and my great-grandparents, none of them spoke Ukrainian. Like they kind of maybe knew it, like my parents knew it, they taught them in school, and they kind of taught me in school, but because they never spoke it, we never practiced it. It was like a foreign language to us. So we were Russian. Ukraine is Russian. So none of this nonsense that like Russia stole Crimea from Ukraine. No. There's Russians there. It's not like Iraq where are all the roadside bombs? Where is the revolution in Crimea right now? From the Russians. You know what I mean? So if Russia took over, stole Crimea like America moved into Iraq, or Afghanistan, you would have constant resistance there. You don't. There are Russians there. As you can see by the election, they were mostly pro-Russians. So, and the rest of the people probably don't care that much enough about it. Like, it's the same. Like, I wouldn't care that much about Ukraine joining the EU. I probably wouldn't want it to happen because I think the EU are the New World Order. They are the proper socialists. The people are saying, oh, well, Russia's socialist and all the stuff. Well, no. The EU is going to be the proper socialist. You'll see in the future. So I don't think Ukraine would have to join up with them. But I wouldn't have minded. Most Russian Ukrainians, or whatever you want to call us, we wouldn't have minded if that happened. And probably a lot of people just saw that as a positive thing because they all thought that joining the EU would instantly make people rich over there and would improve the conditions, because Ukraine is very poor, it's been very corrupt all this time, and it still very much is corrupt. So people who think that it's not corrupt right now are kidding themselves, and I'll get into that too. Some of the shit that's happened apart from the like Hunter Biden, you probably know about that already, and the kind of nonsense that's happening there. You basically have Zelensky imprisoned his political leader, political opposition there, and that happened. So all the things that like Putin is blamed for, Zelensky has done. They've gotten rid of pro-Russian media there, and like the nationalist, hyper-nationalist things that they've done, they've banned people speaking in Russian in school. So like kids on their lunch break aren't allowed to speak Russian there in Ukraine now. So they're trying to push this, and it's basically racism against Russians. So you can have a English-speaking newspaper because they want to like pander to the West. You can have any kind of newspaper in any language. So wherever you're from right now, you probably have there, like if you're from America or from Australia, you're going to have, your Chinese community, your Korean community, whatever it is, and they're going to have their own media. They might have their own like channel that they only speak in their language, Arabic language, whatever it is, and stuff like that. So imagine if that your government said, well, you can't just have that language. Whatever you make, whatever you print, you have to make an exact copy of it in Ukrainian. or you have to make an exact copy of it in English, so specifically. So that would kind of get under people's nerves, right? That would be seen a little bit like racist or too nationalistic, especially by lefties, right? So that's the kind of stuff that's happening there on a small scale. And on a large scale, people are being beaten and killed, which is why you're not going to hear a lot of pro-Russian sentiment until there's a guarantee that some of these towns and places that are taken over are going to stay under the control of Russia, which I hope. I hope Ukraine kind of looks like this map over here that's been voted, that the election was held, once it's all said and done. I don't think Russia will keep Kiev. I think there's too many people that are just like brainwashed and gung-ho about the EU there, but that's fine. I think this election map will create enough of a buffer for Russia to stay safe. And then maybe they can even allow Ukraine to like join the EU or whatever they want to do and have that experience themselves. But there's a lot of anti-Russian, like virile anti-Russian sentiment in Ukraine. Like it's been happening for ages, even before the revolution started. But in that revolution, quote unquote, or takeover, whatever you want to call it, it happened in 2014, where they kicked the legitimate, and there's always going to be corruption, but he was more or less like legitimate. But the people here just as corrupt. They've done the same thing, and they've stacked the boats the same way. Like they've done the same bullshit they for him that they did for the other guy. But the difference is that this guy was stupid enough and manipulated enough by America to create the war, create the situation that's happening here. And this war was organized by NATO and America. It's to their own interest. I just hope it doesn't get escalated further than this, and I hope it comes to a very quick conclusion now. But it came from America's side, and the people just naively like went along with it. And now they're getting the result. Like, it's sad. It should never have happened. I'm totally against the war. Like, ideally, people would have kept living, even with the racism that was happening too. This is why I think, like, there's a silver lining to this thing, is that the treatment of Russians is gonna, hopefully, if Russia keeps these areas. So people are worried that Russia will leave these areas after the takeover, which is why people are too scared to speak out, to speak, or to, like, you know, in the cities, the Russians are giving humanitarian aid, so people are scared to go get it, because they're scared that, well, if the people see them getting aid from the Russians or something like that, well, they might go to their homes at night and take care of them, take them out. That's the kind of shit that would genuinely happen there. But once Russia says, like, Crimea is ours, once they say that, people, you're gonna see pro-Russian. You're gonna see people waving like Russian flags and all this kind of stuff. So Putin is absolutely right that once the fog of war fades and everything, you're gonna have Russia's gonna get back its image, I think, and people, well, if the Western media shows anything, but Russia's gonna show that there is actually a lot of people that are happy that they're there, and certainly in a few years, once they've been decultified, they'll definitely, because there are a lot of people genuinely just brainwashed into the agenda as well. And yeah, that's just how people think. People are just given like black and white, and it's true for the Ukrainian people as well as anybody else in the West. Like they're no more smarter than anyone else, right? All right, so what else do I have to get to? I hope I made some coherent sense, and I hope people picked up some good information about what I've said. So, so throughout 8 years, Russia had the Minsk Accord, which is the separatist, or basically Russians that didn't want anything to do with the bullshit that's happening in the West, who had definitely the president they elected, the leader they elected, forcefully kicked out. They decided, well, we don't want any part of that, and Russia made a pact with Ukraine to stop killing the people there, and they were bombing civilian cities again, because the fascists don't give a shit about people's lives. They don't care about anyone's life but themselves. They don't care about the Ukrainian people, especially the Ukrainians that are living in the Russian areas. So I don't know if they would do it to the people in Kiev, or Kiev, fucking nonsense. Oh, it's so annoying. But they would definitely do it to the people in the southern and eastern towns and the civilians there, because they know they're mostly Russians. So, so yeah, those people didn't want, the eastern Ukrainians didn't want any part of what's happening there, so they split apart. And the Ukrainian government has just been murdering them, killing them. And yeah, that's what's been happening. So everything that the Western media is blaming, again, putting on, killing civilians and all the stuff, that's been happening for the last 8 years, and you didn't hear about it because it wasn't part of the agenda for you to hear about it and to know it. You've been told that it's like Russian propaganda and stuff. And look, if you look at, there's Russian propaganda out there, but Russian propaganda is fucking lame. Like, it's really, really lame. And what I mean by that is they're saying the truth. Like, there's been bombing in the villages there, but they'll have like a kid playing with bullets, and they'll play like this sad music and all this kind of stuff, and it's contrived, it's set up, but it's still based on truth. But they'll just over dramatize stuff, and I don't know if that works on Russians or not. Maybe it does, like, but it's also like semi bullshit. But both the lies that have come out of just Ukraine, the blatant lies, is different from what Russia's doing. Russia's, it's setting up, certain scenes a certain way and stuff like that, and dramatizing things. But Ukraine has just been blatantly lying. And you can see, I hope people can see what they want to do. They want to push NATO, they want to turn this into a World War III, basically. They're using every opportunity by saying that, the Russians bombed the nuclear plant, and that's going to affect everybody, that the Russians are committing war crimes and all this kind of stuff. Whatever excuse they can get, and this is what's scary, is that if people keep believing Ukraine, it could turn into a World War III. If they get enough support, who knows what can happen. But hopefully, I believe the people in charge, they actually know what's going on. Like, they're not that dumb. They understood what's happening. So hopefully that's the case, and they just want to have this like conflict, and then once it all settles down, it's going to be fine. And they'll throw whoever they need to throw under the bus. Hopefully that's the case. So you want to hope that the propaganda that's coming out of Ukraine doesn't stick. But just some of the lies, if you don't know, that the famous lies is that tank running over the car was actually a Ukrainian tank. It wasn't a Russian tank. The island of soldiers who said fuck you to Russia and then all got killed, that never happened. They all surrendered, and they surrendered to the Russians, and they are quite safe. But on the other hand, the Ukrainian government officially has said, one of the other official things that they've said is they will just kill any Russian, even if they're surrendering. So if you want to talk about war crimes or something like that, that's the official statement from the Ukrainian forces. So, and again, some people might be like, rah, rah, well, Putin's bad and Russia's invading and all this stuff. And yeah, so that justifies just, doing whatever they want. Fair enough. That's like the West attitude. Because what the West likes to do when they invade a country, and this, I'll get into a bit of the hypocrisy, is they'll go into like Iraq or Afghanistan, and they'll just bomb the fuck out of everything. They'll kill civilians, they'll kill children there, and then they'll go sweep up, and that's their victory. And that's why it's funny to see that all the Western media is like, can't understand why Ukraine hasn't been taken over yet. They think that Russia has failed taking them over. They don't see that what Russia's doing is it wants the civilians to be safe. Like, Russia won a lot of their wars through manipulation, through basically getting people, like the way the Soviet Union expanded is through talking. And they probably did, chosen assassinations and things like that here and there, but they're really good at basically getting the people. They used to be good. Now Ukraine is even better. I must have picked up some tips. But they used to be very good of getting people on board of their agenda. And that's what they kind of do. And part of that isn't about killing civilians. Like, if Americans took a page from their book, it would probably have caused more, maybe caused more American deaths. Who knows? Maybe it would have like caused less American deaths. But if Americans actually did it properly, cleverly, and caused less civilians to die in Afghanistan and Iraq, I think it's over like 500,000, or maybe even close to, I think some estimates are close to 1 million. And it's becoming really like what Stalin said, where one death is a tragedy. You know, you put one person on TV getting blown up, and that's a tragedy in Ukraine. Whereas the hundreds of thousands that are killed by America, unjustifiably, that's a statistic. So people just ignore that. And, you know, I'm going to finish on this, and then maybe if there's anything else I mixed, I'll make another video, because I'm getting kind of like a little bit tired of talking. But just my mouth feels like dry, and maybe I should have gotten a water before I started this. But Russia is way more justified going into Ukraine than like Australia is for going into Iraq, right? Russia has more justification of being scared of NATO than Australia has of Iraq or Afghanistan. And yet, in Australia, in America, they've still got the same government that started these wars, that invaded other countries and killed all, that are responsible for all these hundreds of thousands of deaths. And then the West, comically, well, first of all, they want Putin to just like stub his toe or like fall on his head or something and have an accident. But the other thing that they want is for the Russian people to stand up and overtake the president and, you know, kill him and, you know, take Russia back and stuff like that. And it's just stupid. Like, we have a proper, I'm not gonna like try to pretend that Russia has a proper, although I'm pretty sure even if Russia had a proper democracy, I think Putin would still win, like right now. But I'm not going to pretend that they have a proper democracy. But I'm also not going to pretend that's genuinely a good thing. Like, America has a proper America isn't supposed to have a proper democracy. But if it had a proper democracy, if it was just the majority of the people deciding the president, you would have fucking Biden all the time. You would have Hillary Clinton. You would never had Trump. So even America doesn't have a proper democracy, because proper democracies don't work. But that's a totally different topic. But it's just funny, like Americans, Australians, they're talking about how, oh well, hopefully Putin will get, the Russian citizenry will overtake him. But we haven't even voted the people out in our country. The same political parties are in power here that are responsible for all those hundreds of thousands of deaths. So it's so hypocritical. Alright, I'm gonna just end this video on this. And if there's definitely things that I've missed, but I'll get into it in another video. So thanks for listening, guys. I pray I've given you some information and hopefully like swayed you a little bit. And I'm happy to like answer more questions and get into specifics and examples and things like that. So just comment if you see this video. And anything else, I'll just fill out. But I'm going to leave this video, and this is going to be the video I'm just going to link to people to get my thoughts on the situation. Alright, thanks guys, all the best.